The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as personal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional or expert in the relevant field for personalised advice tailored to your specific situation. Early retirement, it's quite controversial because it means different things to different people.
How the heck am I going to get financial freedom? How am I going to retire early when I'm faced with this?
A lot of the time people think that debt is a bad thing. It's not always necessarily a bad thing.
I need to pay down my debt. I'm really stressed about debt. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wealth Guide podcast sponsored by Ryker Capital.
So many Australians don't realise that those additional super contributions can actually be tax effective. If you don't start thinking about these things now and preparing for them, there's so many strategies and tax efficient strategies that you're potentially going to miss out on. Time is the most powerful benefit on your side. The earlier you can get financial planning advice, the better off you're going to be long term.
Really excited today. We're kicking off a series that has 3 episodes. So getting into episode 1 today. Now, what is our series about? Our title is Retire Early Without Sacrificing the Quality of Your Lifestyle. Is that even doable? Is that controversial? And before you tune out because I said the word retire and you think that you are too young for that, the other thing our clients come to us and ask for is financial freedom and making sure they have the resources to make choices about how they spend their time. And they want balance while they're doing that. They want to enjoy the journey as well. So this is really a hot topic, which is why we're doing 3 episodes across the whole spectrum of our clients, from the young to the people who are just approaching retirement and going into retirement. Now, who do I have on the couch with me for this series? 3 people. First of all, I want to introduce and say hello to Ray Regmi, who is the principal, g'day Ray, principal and senior financial advisor of Ryker Capital, of course.
Welcome. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for coming, Ray. Also from Ryker, I want to introduce Dean Dasuki. Dean is also a senior financial advisor.
Hello guys, nice to meet you, sir.
Very excited as well. We do have a guest for our series. So I do want to welcome Natalie Philips.
Thank you.
Natalie is the New South Wales State Manager of Allianz Retire Plus. So we're very excited that she's joining us for all 3 episodes of our series today. Now, I might just dive into, we like to do this a little bit with our guests. I want to really get to know Natalie just a little bit because we're so excited to have you here. Would you mind just kind of, how did you get into this industry? How did you land at Allianz Retire Plus? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Absolutely. So I've actually been in the financial services industry for over 15 years. I actually had to count that up last night in preparation for the question. And it might actually be a little bit over that, but I'm just sticking with the over 15 years. Stick with that. Trying to make myself sound younger. I love it. Prior to Allianz Retire Plus, I worked for another product provider. I've worked in financial services. I've actually worked overseas as well. I've worked in the UK, in London. Oh, wow. And look, I'm just passionate about advice, whether I'm working within a financial planning office or whether it's with a product provider. I just think, just like accountants, really I think financial planning should be held up on a pedestal because it really does allow people, Australians especially, to live a really comfortable life and retirement and reach that financial freedom and enjoy life. We're really lucky as Australians especially. We're living longer, healthier, more active lives, far more than we were, say, 50 years ago. And so I think it's really important that you've got someone there holding your hand as a financial coach through all those life stages, which I know we're gonna cover today.
We're definitely going to, that sounds great. No, thank you. Really excited. And 15 years. So on the plus side, you've been doing this for a while. You've got lots of experience and you look really young. So all good there, all good there. No, I'm glad. And I hear your passion as well. I know that you and I were chatting before the podcast, and I do know you're definitely very passionate about that kind of thing, as are our advisors, which is why we're excited about this series. Look, let's dive into episode 1. So what are we doing in this episode? We're laying the groundwork. We're setting the foundations for what people are wanting and needing when they're coming to see us at Ryker Capital, and kind of busting some myths at a starting point to really kind of unpack how we're going to go about and what are these, as I said, foundational things we need to do when somebody comes to us and talks about early retirement, financial freedom, that kind of thing. So let's dive into it without without any other pause. Or what I wanted to do, just probably the ground point I want to say is people I know, are working hard for their money. They want their money to work hard for them. There's no doubt about it. I might throw over to you, Ray, to start off with. If you could give us some context about that relative to what are the economic conditions people are facing right now.
Absolutely. Look, I think firstly off, the topic today that we're talking about, early retirement, it's quite controversial because it means different things to different people and can be sometimes be challenging when people are going, well, how am I not getting the grasp of this early retirement and what does that mean? So look, obviously, to your point earlier, Tamara, I think life in Australia can be challenging. We've got pressures of high cost living, limited work-life balance, affording household, the groceries in household just expensive.
Expenses, yeah.
And like I walk out to Woolies and what I paid $600 and what I got out in the bag is two different stories.
Couple of things.
I know.
What did I just buy?
An enforced diet now, anyway.
So we do have these kind of pressures that we are currently facing widely in Australia at the moment. So I think that does put a bit of pressure for households in general.
Yeah. And I can see why you said, is it controversial? So people are struggling with this and they're going, well, how the heck am I going to get financial freedom? How am I going to retire early when I'm faced with this? Is that kind of what you meant by it?
Yeah.
Dean, are you finding the same thing when you're talking to clients? Is that kind of top of mind over the last
definitely. I think
period?
especially I'd probably say the last year or so where the fact that obviously interest rates have gone up as high as they are. People's mortgages now, they're paying a lot of money on towards their mortgage and it's consuming a lot of their household income. And that, like what Ray was saying, you go to you do your grocery shop, it's probably gone up at least 100%. You're paying close to double what you used to. Even going to the petrol pump, putting in petrol.
That is shocking.
It's people get a heart attack just doing that, so it's a bit scary as well. So obviously, cost of living's definitely gone up. So.
Okay, so no, it's a bit of hand-to-hand combat. And to your point, Natalie, it's good to have a professional on your team that's going to hold your hand, right?
Absolutely.
All right, well, maybe let's talk about, because I did lead into this. I know from discussions with you advisors, we get people from all stages in life, from young people to all the way through to being mature age people. Maybe if we can kind of unpack in detail and so that the audience can really potentially recognize themselves in some of the, I guess, focuses, some of the goals, some of the major things people want assistance with as they go through life stages. So I might throw over to yourself, Dean, just because I know I won't even talk about age. You're a young professional, a relatively young professional, and I know you do see a lot of clients who are on the younger side. Can you talk about what are some of the focuses of people when they come to you for that first bit of professional guidance in their 20s, early 30s?
The journey starts from probably when people just finish even just high school or their studies and just trying to come up with some form of saving strategies to purchase their first property. So I'm seeing a lot of clients along that side of things. And previously speaking, to being able to just generally save used to be a lot easier than what it is today. So I've helped a few clients around that, just trying to get them ready for being able to purchase their first property. And then once they've achieved that goal, then the next stage is when they start getting married and trying to build a family as well, where you've got young kids and things like that. And in that aspect as well, there's so much going on in that situation, right? So at that stage, they get married, saving for a wedding, having all those types of stuff, and then trying to buy again with their new partner, their first home together, and then at the same time as well trying to create a family, right? So having kids in daycare, schooling, and things like that. So there's that constant pressure of that financial need, where there's people's lives are constantly evolving and changing, and there's just a lot of things that just life just demands, and planning and putting things into place can obviously definitely help them get through those goals.
So Ray, maybe we'll dive into that, because you yourself do have, you and your partner, your wife have young children at home. What are the types of things, I guess, challenges and then focus areas of what clients in that situation are coming to you with, and what you need to work on for them?
Absolutely, Tamara. So look, obviously, when I look at the life stages of financial planning, I sort of tend to look at them in a different sort of age bracket and age categories. So it'd be anywhere between 35 to 45, 45 to 55, 55 to 65, and 65 and over. So particularly in my case, anywhere between 35 to 45, usually they have challenges with the mortgage, like Dean's mentioned. You've got a bit of tax planning, insurances. They're wanting to buy an investment property, but they want to be able to sort of accumulate wealth in a very tax effective manner. So the way we look at some of the strategies are right from the budgeting side to the tax minimization strategies to addressing some of the earlier loan repayments. So there are a variety of strategies that we can tackle early on in the piece, which sort of helps them.
But just to add to that point as well, Ray, I think especially at that specific age bracket, that 35 to 45, a lot of people tend to be earning very good incomes at that stage, right?
Correct.
So that is the time, and I always explain to my clients, that is the time, given we've got the income, it's important that we structure everything correctly so that we can get the maximum out of it, because that's all that's going to help with building your overall financial well-being and health. So
no, spot on, Dean.
Yeah.
So these are keys to making your money work hard for you, is these areas of, your budgeting, tax planning, etc.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be the key to open up opportunities to actually build up your money and have it actually produce revenue for you eventually? Is that the idea?
So the idea is to utilize your tax dollars wisely as much as you can.
Yeah.
So as we sort of spoke about earlier, that you do get this limited amount of working life, and how do you go about utilizing that tax money effectively as much as you can? So whether it be sort of saving for kids and providing a bit of a tax effective investment bonds for the kids, right? Or perhaps making some catch up contributions because that's available to you, and build up your superannuation.
That's a really good point. We actually, this is anecdotal feedback that we get across the board, and I'd be interested to see if you guys see the same thing, but so many Australians don't realise that those additional super contributions can actually be tax effective. You can do that, annually, and top up your super, and actually from a take home income perspective, not be that much worse off.
No.
I mean, do you find that a lot of Australians still don't really understand that concept?
They don't, Natalie, and you're absolutely right. And to give you an example, what we do as a family is we'll, in May or June, we'll have a look going, well, okay, what is some of our cap is available? We'll go, well, okay, I'll take that chunk out of my offset account. I'll make that contribution in my super up to the cap, that is. And then when I do my tax return in July, I go, hello, Mr. Accountant. I'll put in about $7,000. I'd like to claim that as a tax deduction. Thank you. So it's a nice little chunk that you sort of get that back at the end of the financial year. So my mortgage hasn't been affected quite a bit up until that whole 11 months. And whilst I've taken that money out of my mortgage, in July, whatever I get as my tax return based on your marginal tax rate, I'll go and put that back in my home loan again.
Yeah, amazing.
So it's a nice lifty little strategy there, but obviously you've got to make sure that you speak to your accountant and your financial planner to make sure that the structure is right or the strategy is right.
Well, what I'm picking up here too, because now you're talking about in that age group, that younger age group, that there are lots of different things they need to do. And then you have that overarching financial freedom, retire early. So there's lots of different things people need their money to do in addition to this financial freedom or retire early. So that seems to be a challenge because you're juggling multiple goals of clients at different times in their life. Is that right?
Yeah. And you tend to, because what you're trying to juggle is through your mortgage, your insurance repayments, your general living expenses, kids' school fees. There's a variety of other expenses that you're trying to maintain. But I think that key part that we spoke about, budgeting, and the key to that is discipline.
Yeah.
Everything comes down to that discipline and creating right habits.
That's what I wanted to dive into because I know you brought it up, and I know you, definitely, Dean, we were talking about a client, and that was really key. You did give a couple of examples of clients where you did that with. And it was really because a lot of people don't understand that financial advisors talk about and work with them on budgeting or cash flow management, because that is fundamental or foundational to getting this right. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, absolutely, Tamara. But it's also making sure that good financial habits that you create, you have someone going over it and making sure that they are done right, they are spent the right way. Not to say that, when you're creating budgeting, you're trying to restrict your life. There are some of the spendings that you'd want to sort of do that, would improve
you really
your
enjoy.
lifestyle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is that balance we talked about as well. Dean, can you dive into talking with clients around, I think you were saying in the context you gave me, it was really going into discretionary spending decisions, which is kind of what Ray was saying as well. It's like I've got some money where I've got some discretion over deciding how I'm going to spend it. So it's not, groceries and utilities and stuff. And it's really, was it kind of the balance of enjoying now, but also making sure that you enjoy in the future? How do you have those conversations with clients?
So, look, one of the key things and one of the handy things that I do with clients as well, it's actually a massive eye opener, is when going through clients and helping them through completing the budget. then they can really see where their money is going.
It's an awareness.
Correct. And I think the most interesting part is when they put usually a lot of their fixed expenses through this budget planner, you end up seeing at the end of it maybe like a cash surplus of 20 or 30 grand, and then you stop and you ask them, okay, well, based off everything, this is the money that you should be saving, but where is it going?
Kids.
a lot of it goes to discretionary spending. So, and I always say to clients, look, I think especially this day and age, we work long hours and we work hard for our income. So I think it's still definitely important. Obviously, clients can still enjoy themselves and all that type of stuff, but at the same time as well, putting some of this money and preparing for their future, whether it's going to be things like preparing for their retirement, putting extra repayments towards their mortgage, but just dialing a few things just to keep building their financial future is very important.
So it sounds like the key is when it actually you see what your spending decisions can do, are doing right now, and can potentially in the future as well. Natalie, you and I were talking before the podcast because you are in this category in the sense that you are young with your husband and you've got young kids.
Yeah, too.
How do you manage this? The habits, discretionary spending choices? Talk us through. You could be a client of ours.
Yes, absolutely. Well, to Dean's point, I think that budget, I actually was nervous about doing it.
Okay. Is that common, Ray?
Full confession. I like
common. It's very common.
Like, most of the people want to craft budget for their lifestyle, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the key. Sorry, Natalie, you just jumped in there.
No. It's a great point. So I like shoes and I like handbags.
Yeah.
But it was a really, really valuable exercise, and it also keeps you accountable. So, and it's just that awareness piece that, it might be something small like, you're going out for dinner twice a month. Maybe just carve that back to once a month. And actually what we've found, my husband and I, is we look forward to that much more than as we go through the year, because it's a little bit more special. And we understand that sacrificing of maybe only doing it once a month opposed to doing it twice a month is that we'll probably reach our financial freedom earlier. So you don't actually mind. And like I said, it's actually become something that we look forward to. So
really you feel like you've achieved that balance. So you're still, to Ray's point, you're still enjoying doing some stuff. So you're not curtailing or you're not giving up your lifestyle.
Exactly.
You're enjoying your lifestyle now so you can also enjoy the future you, I guess.
Spot on.
Is that right? Is that what you're
And many people will think about budgeting as putting a restriction on their life, and that's not what it's about. So it's about sort of creating those right habits and saving money, and then also rewarding yourself because you've done the right behaviors. And I think that's the key to it, that you've got to be able to enjoy your life at the same time.
So is that what you find? Because you talked about changing habits and building habits. Are those the keys, Ray? Is it the awareness? It's making decisions that are intentional with your assistance, being aware, and then living it and seeing that it's working well. Is that the habit forming?
So it's in particularly from my side, what we do is we'll go, well, okay, this is our budget, what we sort of need for living day-to-day expenses. But the same token, much to Natalie's point, we'll go, well, okay, well, let's take the kids out to Luna Park today, and that be our little enjoyment there. And then we'll sort of then park away a little bit of money to go, well, we're going to utilize this part of our future planning where we're sort of investing that money in perhaps a superannuation or an investment bond for the kids, or perhaps for an investment property. And that could be the trickier parts that you sort of go, well, how do I manage these moving parts of the budget in a way where I'm also rewarding myself for the right things I'm doing, but also building up for my future.
And who knew financial advisors had anything to do with that, right? No, that's really good. Well, maybe let's now move to a slightly older life stage. So we're over 45. What was the next life stage that you kind of chunked it down to?
55 to 65.
Okay. Maybe if we go to a little bit, so I'm 45 to kind of 55-ish. So I'm not traditionally thinking of retirement. Maybe I should be. That's part of the controversy. What are the kinds of things that people are really focusing on, kind of that 45 to 55 mark?
Usually what we find is they want to prioritize paying down the loan a lot quicker. So that's a big part of their strategy. Again, it's sort of then also a bit of a self-reflection process of going, well, okay, I've got X amount of dollars. How's this going to last me for my retirement years. So people are then aggressively start to building up their retirement savings, either utilizing the super or perhaps sort of paying down the debts. And usually that's what we find. Or even approaching towards 55, they're looking more towards the transition to retirement strategies to go, how do I maximize some of these key strategies to build, not only build my retirement plan, but also
you want to be debt free.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. I know that Natalie, you and I were talking as well when we were prepping for the podcast too, and finding that, to Ray's point, 45-ish, is it kind of more, you're still not really at that 45 mark, really focused and maybe enough arguably on, financial freedom, early retirement.
Well, especially in this day and age, I think, obviously with us all living longer, healthier, more active lives, there's a real societal change and shift in that regard. And so a lot of people aren't, I'm in my 40s. I'm happy to disclose that. And I've got young children, so I'm a long way off. But if you don't start thinking about these things now and preparing for them, there's so many strategies and tax efficient strategies that you're potentially going to miss out on. I think the best quote that I've heard so far is that time is the most powerful benefit on your side. So, I don't need to probably go on about compound interest or compound earnings, but Albert Einstein said that was the eighth wonder of the world. So, and there's a reason for that. And I think from a financial planning perspective, that's what it really comes down to. The earlier you can get financial planning advice, the better off you're going to be long term. So I know it might seem a little bit preemptive or too soon to really start thinking about that retirement phase or shift in lifestyle. We're actually seeing that, it might not be a definitive point in time that you decide to retire. What we're actually seeing with the data, a lot of clients aren't thinking about that they're going to retire until age 65 from the ABS data. But on top of that, we're actually seeing, I think the OECD data also shows that in the last decade up until 2022, those that are over 65 participating in the workforce, that's actually doubled. So, and I think that's because, you might lose a loved one and you might be bored, you want to re-engage, you might find a sense of purpose in work, that connection with colleagues. There's lots of different reasons that you'd want to, maintain that working life, whether it be part-time, full-time. And so it might not be that you're planning for a definitive end date. It might just be a shift or a change in the work that you do. And so that's exciting. But I think if you can engage with a financial planner earlier, the better.
To be able to do it. Because the other thing might be that you have to work as well.
Absolutely.
All those great things, but also then people having to work as well too. So that engagement with financial advisors. So that's not the primary reason that you're working still at 65.
Correct.
Is also what you want to do. How do you, Dean, not shift the conversation? What kind of priority conversations do you have with clients who might come to you at 45 and they're definitely focusing on paying down debt, which completely makes sense. But how do you kind of expand and have the conversation around what Natalie and Ray were saying around, let's also consider this. Why would they consider this? You know what I mean? Not just focusing on that, but that longer term, making sure we're getting early retirement or financial freedom. How do you conduct those conversations?
So what I usually do is I always have the conversation with clients around, okay, now what are your plans for retirement? A lot of the time, they actually, especially because they're still pretty young.
And they go, whoa, I'm only 45. What are you talking about?
Correct.
I have young kids.
That's unfortunately, the reality is that's actually what they actually say to me.
Yes.
They actually say to me, I haven't thought about it. But the thing is that the earlier you start to plan for these stages of retirement, then the easier it is to be able to hit those goals. And unfortunately, this day and age, what we're starting to see is a lot of people are leaving it towards the back end. And because that's the case, to hit those milestones or those goals that they want to achieve during retirement, it's not saying that it's impossible, but it's not as easy as it would have been had they planned a lot harder. And I think just to touch up on some of those points as well, Ray, is that a lot of people are missing certain goals in the sense that people work so hard to pay off their debt, right? And once they've achieved that, then they're like, okay, well, I'm done. And then they feel like they've achieved everything that they had. And then they start going on, their discretionary spending starts to heavily increase, right? Yep. But they don't start planning and like, okay, well, I've sorted out the one goal. I've got my security around the roof over my head. And that stage of planning for retirement, that just completely goes over their head. It's not something they've really thought about. And then they only think about it in potentially the last 5 years or so of their working life.
I'm going to put a client hat on, or a layperson's hat on, definitely, because I'm not a financial advisor. If I do not have a goal of what to do with my money, I will spend more. And I call it discretionary spending creep, because if I have a goal, I'm good. Like, for example, what you said, if I'm putting extra repayments in my mortgage, I know what I'm doing and I adjust my decisions around that. So are you kind of saying that's why it's so important? So that is a goal, paying down debt. Make sure clients have goals for the money, or they get out of these great habits. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Correct. But also keeping them accountable at the same time to go, well, look, we're sort of approaching closer to paying off the mortgage. What is the next purpose? What is that you're trying to achieve as far as your financial goals goes? So then the variety of different sort of conversations sort of comes in at that point in time for them, going, well, look, okay, well, we've achieved, how about an investment property? Okay, yep, that's achievable. Then we've got to talk about the duration, the liquidity, and the variety of other parts that goes with sort of enhancing or creating an asset at that point in time.
So you're talking about painting a picture for a client.
Yeah.
So if you do this with your money, which is entirely doable, this is the potential result. So it's painting the picture, isn't it?
Exactly.
Really?
And painting the different scenarios of what you could do with that money.
Yeah.
What are some of the tax strategies that you can involve around the particular different asset classes, and how that structure would look like for you in a bit of a 10-year or 15-year time frame, if you like.
Because when you're talking about, I'd like to drill into that a little bit, because you're talking about, different decisions on asset classes and stuff. So what is that concept around people's choice on how they do that? Is that taking on more investment risk to achieve goals, more or less? If you turn the dial on that, I get different outcomes. Is that what? Could you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely, Tamara. So effectively, let's just say we're going to use super fund as an example. So when you sort of play around with some of the risk profiles, you would get a different outcomes for the customers. Now, someone who's in their 40s, if they are on, let's just say, a very aggressive sort of investment risk allocation, what it allows them, even with the ups and downs of the market, it sort of gives them a significant rate of return by the time, let's just say, we're going to say they're going to retire at age 60. So it gives them a significant return on their investment as compared to what you'd have on a bit of a balanced risk profile, which is a for 60-40. It'd be significantly less than what they would have had otherwise on the growth risk profile. Similarly, we look at the properties and what are some of the tax advantages we could have got out of the properties in the form of negative gearing. Similar sort of thing with the superannuation. If we would have made some sort of salary sacrifice over the course of 20 years, what does that look like in the form of tax savings? But also, what does that mean in terms of compounding of growth using different risk profiles? So you're playing out with different scenarios, different tax structures, and variety of other asset classes to go, well, okay, if you do X, this is the outcome with different sort of risk profiling. And if you do Y with the property, this is the outcome with the property alongside with the tax savings.
And then it's really painting the picture so people can then go, I am comfortable with this. I know what I can achieve this. I also would like to achieve this. And now that I understand it, I'm comfortable and I want to do that. So it's really giving people clarity so they...
Correct. And purpose.
And clarity and purpose.
Yeah. So it giving you the purpose to go, okay, I really like that because that's the asset class I resemble with. And I'd like to sort of utilize that part of the structure and that part of the tax strategy. And that gives them something to aim towards for the retirement. Or for that early retirement, as we call it.
Early retirement, that's right. Financial freedom is how I put it. But no, that sounds good. That's taking that compound interest concept to another level. It's kind of getting into the detail, isn't it, Natalie?
Absolutely. And on top of that, it's about, I think you just said it earlier, Dean, it's about choice. So it's not always sometimes about a financial outcome, but my husband and I are worried about where our kids are going to live. And so an investment property, for example, I mean, it might make sense for us from a financial and tax point of view, but also it could be something that our kids can live in 20 years time. So sometimes there's multiple goals, and getting that advice around that is really important. It's imperative. So I think those life goals and the financial goals, sometimes they actually are combined. Yeah,
I was just going to say, you're talking about lifestyle and financial goals, aren't you, as well? Excellent. Another way to turn the dial too, in addition to deciding what kind of level of risk you're comfortable with to achieve goals, is a level of gearing or debt that a client would go into. Do you kind of talk about that as well, Dean? Looking at kind of gearing and...
The thing is, a lot of the time people think that debt is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not always necessarily a bad thing.
I need to pay down my debt. I'm really stressed about debt,
course.
having debt.
When it comes to things like non-deductible debt, things like on their mortgage of the principal place of residence, then yes, that makes sense, because technically speaking, we're paying an interest rate to the bank where that's kind of dead money, right? But in the event of investing and utilizing gearing, then it's actually a great structure, because it allows you to then claim that as a tax deduction, and it puts you in a better position from a tax perspective. But then also at the same time as well, it allows you to be able to buy an asset and have that asset invested for that capital appreciation and just the overall financial freedom. So,
and to Dean's point as well, I'm like, it's a double-edged sword. You got to think about those debt strategies quite carefully, because obviously it depends on the time frame of what your time frame of retirement is. Because traditionally your mortgages are 25 to 30 year mortgages, so it's just got to make sure that it fits within that time frame. Secondly, what you're buying and how you're buying it. So I think there's quite a bit of consideration there. I'm like, if you think about a traditional mortgage of $1 million for an investment property with the current interest rate of 6%, that's just $60,000 in interest, right? Now you factor in the rental income might be $45,000, but then out of that you're paying real estate agents' fees, insurances, rates, water, strata, council, capital works. Now you add some of those costs up, you're looking at about $75,000, but your rent you're getting is $40,000. So ideally I'm shelling out $70,000, which means I'm putting hand in my pocket to pay for it. And if my marginal tax rate's 40%, I'm only getting $28,000 to $30,000 back. But yet I've still forked out extra $40,000 out of my pocket.
I think that's one of the traps that a lot of people tend to fall in. Where they, I think, especially if we're going to talk specifically about, because we do see this a lot with property, where especially from a gearing perspective, it is very cash hungry. Like as long as if you don't have the cash flow to do it, right, and there's no, it can be very detrimental at times. And there's so many stories that I could actually say where I've seen clients had challenges and they fell in that trap. So,
and we've seen that over quite a bit of time, but obviously, and that's why, look, investment property can be a phenomenal strategy, but it's just got to make sure that you've got that part of the structure and strategy right, and the potential growth areas, and there's a lot of that goes into it before you pick out the right property, because you don't want to be doing that over the course of 10, 15 years, because then you've shelled out a lot of cash. Yes, you got the potential of capital growth. So, I'm like, some of the clients argue with me going, well, Ray, that $1 million property in 5 years worth about $2 million. I'm like, that's great, but did you think about the capital gain tax if you were to sell it?
Yeah.
So there has to be a strategy around it as well.
There has to be. Everything should have an entry and exit strategy out of it.
That's a really, really good point. Rather than kind of going, I really want an investment property, and that can be a really good strategy. It has to be tied to your time frames, your specific goals, what you think that needs to achieve as well, and make sure that it ticks all of the boxes.
Because if not, it could go completely reverse for that early retirement strategy. It could extend your retirement.
Exactly. It could kind of go pear-shaped that way as well. Okay, no, that... So seeing, and that's again why I think it was really important for us to really frame this. We're talking about early retirement, but we're talking about financial freedom and hitting all the goals and doing all the things that you want to do with your money before you get in your head, retire, I'm an older person. So that's really what we're trying to reframe that. So it sounds like to me what you're saying, the sooner that you're engaging with professional advice, the better off you could potentially be, and how important it is. I know that you and I were talking about, you have a bit of an analogy and some stats on that. I might kind of throw over to you.
Oh, I have a great analogy.
I know,
I can't take credit for it. But it was told to me by another financial planner, and I've bandied it around a little bit, which is I think, in terms of a financial plan, it's, think of life as a game of soccer. You're going to be far more successful and win the game if you have a great coach, the team's on the same side and has a common goal, i.e. budget that everyone's aware of, and you've got a strategy, a game plan. So otherwise you're playing soccer in the dark.
I love it. We don't want any of our clients to play soccer in the dark,
and apologies, in our household we call it football. So for anyone else out there, I will refer to it as football as well. But
and you definitely don't want to get a red card on a regular basis.
Okay. Look at that. That sounds great. Well, thank you very much. I think we've definitely set the foundation for for this 3-episode series, how important and crucial it is to kind of pay attention, get that really, really good advice sooner rather than later to make sure that you're enjoying the journey and you're getting that financial freedom, retire early as soon as possible without encroaching on the lifestyle that you really want to enjoy. Thanks, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you in the second episode of this series. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.